So I know we talked about it during your instructor course, or more specifically during your assistant instructor course, but I know that one of the most daunting things about being a new instructor and going to teach that first class is figuring out how you're going to schedule everything. So I'm going to take a few minutes to go over that. We'll review what we talked about during the instructor course, and then I'll talk a little bit more specifically about how I run my courses. Of course, you guys are welcome to do it differently. So, again, these are just ideas. You can do it however you want. There's very few restrictions on how to schedule the course within the standards. And then by all means, utilize technology to leverage your time to the best of your advantage. So use the e-learning stuff, use things like Ted Hardy's roadmap to Frenzel, and then you can use things like Zoom too, depending on where you're teaching and how easy it is to get classroom space and get your students to that classroom. So that's something to keep in mind. So general scheduling ideas, the Freediver course could be like 2 evenings and a full day, or an evening and 2 full days, which I think is probably the most utilized option. And the 6-hour classroom time is talking about doing it in a traditional sense. So if you're going to go through, not use e-learning and go through the whole PowerPoint, it takes about 6 hours because you got to do an exam and fill out paperwork and all that stuff, right? And then we recommend a minimum of 5 hours of confined hour, which I find to be pretty close. I usually spend just a little bit more time, and closer to probably 5.5 hours. But it's usually just to let them do more repetitions with entries. And then open water, 5 to 6 hours, somewhere there. So, all right, so here's the formats that you saw in your instructor course exam. I'm not going to talk about them. You can pause the video and go through them again. We've already talked about these. So how do I do it? First of all, I do utilize e-learning and the roadmap to Frenzel course. I think those are invaluable. So they do all that before the course begins on the first day, which is usually a Friday evening. There's going to be a 2 to 3 hour academic review, and then and paperwork, assuming it's in person. So if it's if you're doing it remotely, you do the paperwork when you meet them at the pool. And then day 2, pool in the morning, ocean in the afternoon. Day 3, so that's usually Sunday, pool in the morning, ocean in the afternoon. So that's generally how I schedule my courses. And then within those sessions, here's the one that you saw in your instructor course. Keep in mind that this is like to do everything the classic way of teaching a PFI Freediver course. Since this was created, we updated standards and we made some of the skills general requirements or graduation requirements. So you don't have to do it this way, but this was like the OG way. So how do I do it? In the first pool session, I start off with recovery, breathing, and safety. So start with this is where you should be standing and that kind of stuff. Review the recovery breathing, then move into elements at the surface, then blackout at the surface, then those rollover blackouts. And while you're doing all those things, you're kind of introducing like how do we perform a static. So how do we enter a static? How do we exit a static? Especially the exit, for obviously it's relevant to how you're doing that skill there. And then we do statics, which includes everything you didn't already talk about, right? How do we safety statics? How do you how do you touch the diver? How do you signal to the diver? How do you help the diver exit the static? What are things that you're looking for? That kind of stuff. So then you do that first static session, which is the 4 statics. Then you do the points. So then you move to the deep end of the pool, do the points check, fin use on the surface, and then into the entries. And that's usually a good chunk of time there. So the entries is probably spend 45 minutes to an hour working on those, because it really is one of those skills that just needs to be repeated. And then depending on how time is going, and so a lot of that depends on how big your class is, the size of the pool, so how quickly you move through the statics and that kind of stuff. I'll do the open water freediving sim. If I don't have time for that, that'll happen on day 2. And then we'll do tread water generally at the end of that first day. So then the second confined water session or second pool session, we roll right into the day 2 statics. Then we give them lots of opportunity to work on those entries. So on my normal course schedule now, they've had 1 ocean session, so it probably makes a little more sense as to what they're doing and why they're doing it. So now we really spend a lot of time driving in those details, and I find that students tend to make a lot of improvement in this session. Then, if we didn't complete the open water freediving sim from the first day, we'll do that again. And then if the student hasn't completed the 5-meter skills yet, so flooded mask descent and the weight belt removal, I'll do it in the pool. If they've already accomplished that in the ocean, so again, in my normal course schedule, right, it's pool in the morning, day 2, ocean in the afternoon, day 2, pool in the morning, day 3, ocean in the afternoon, day 3. So they've already had 1 ocean session. If they've done those skills, I just skip them. They don't have to do it again in the pool. There's no requirement. In fact, it's kind of pointless. But if they haven't done it in the ocean yet, either because they weren't able to because they couldn't equalize, or because you scheduled your course so that you're doing the pool session, the second pool session before the first ocean session, if that makes sense, then I'll do these skills, because you have to do those skills in the pool in order to issue a pool only certification. So I want to make sure that I do that, take advantage of that, so I don't have to bring it back to the pool for the 3rd time in order to issue that certification. And then same with snorkel use. If I haven't seen them use their snorkel well, which I know sounds silly, right? But maybe that first day was that super glassy day and they didn't have to clear the snorkel, then I'll make them do it. So I would rather do that skill in the pool than in the ocean. And I want to see him, if I might have to force him to do it. So I want to see him do it. And then we'll do the underwater blackout. And it's up to you if you want to like certify the underwater blackout. Well, that's not true. So if your student is having trouble, like with equalizing, or they're having trouble with their ears or whatever, and you think they may not be able to perform the underwater blackout skill in the ocean, you have to do the full skill in the pool. So they have to do the 25-meter evacuation. Generally, I just introduce the skill in the pool as long as I think my student is going to complete the full certification. I just introduce the skill in the pool because it's hard to do in the pool, especially if it's a shallow pool like the one that I typically use. Or if you have a really deep pool, just do the skill because it's easy. But I just want to introduce the skill, get them familiar with the idea of how to assist underwater, because then they actually have to perform the skill in the ocean. But if you're going to issue the freediver only or the pool only certification, you have to do this full skill in the pool. Okay, in the ocean sessions, then ocean session 1, which is after the first pool session, generally in my layout, we start with the buoyancy check. I try to do it close to the boat so that if we have to change out weights, we're not swimming back and forth. I didn't write it down here. I just realized that now, but I also will work in the 25-meter no mask snorkel and the 300-meter snorkel for the swim test. And then, and depending on how you're doing your courses, right? If you're not using a boat, the swim is really easy. If you're using a boat, you got to get a little more creative. But so start with the buoyancy check, roll into the 5-meter free immersion. So the idea here is you're just introducing free immersion. You're not looking for them to have mastered it, but you want them to know what free immersion is, because they probably haven't done it before. This whole idea of pulling down the rope doesn't make sense to them. And then you also want to assess their equalization. So once you start adding all these other skills, it could become overwhelming for them to try to do too much at once. So introduce free immersion, and then of course you don't have to, but that's why I like to do it. And then 5-meter positive buoyancy, 5-meter weight belt remove and replace, 5-meter flooded mask descent, 10-meter neutral buoyancy, so which also is your 10-meter free immersion, right? and then I bring the plate back up to 5 meters, and we do constant weight. Now, based on how many students you've had and how many times you had to repeat any of those skills in order to get them to accomplish it, that might be basically all the time you have, so you can go do that surface LMC, so you get at least one rescue done the first day. But if you have a small class or they're really cruising, then maybe some 10 meter constant weight, introduce kick cycles, then the surface LMC, and then the surface blackout if you have lots of time on the first session. In the second session, start with a buoyancy check if it's required. So if somebody changed their wetsuit or anything like that, make sure you're doing the buoyancy check. Do a free immersion warm up. And then when you're doing this warm up, this is your opportunity to hit any of those skills from the day before if they weren't able to complete them. So maybe they're having trouble with their ears, and now maybe they think they fixed it. So now you can get that, 10 meter initial buoyancy that they couldn't get done on day one or whatever it is. And then once we've done with the warm up, unless I have a class that I feel like they really want to try to go deeper with free immersion, they've already met the requirements. Most likely, as long as, because they'll have done 6 and they'll have down to at least 10 meters. So move on to constant weight. And I wrote 5 or 10. It's whatever they were doing the day before. So I don't want to start out at a deeper depth. I like to start at whatever we were doing the day before. So if you only did 5 meters on day 1, start with 5 meters on day 2. And then, just keep working that constant weight and going deeper until you don't have time anymore. So work on skills, just keep rehearsing. If you have a really great class and you get all the way to 20 meters, and you still have lots of time, start doing hangs at 20 meters or something like that, right? You can't go deeper, that's not okay, but you can do hangs at 20 meters or stuff like that. So you can really, or really drill down on those kick cycles, whatever, but use the time to make them better divers within the standards, right? And then if you didn't get the surface blackout done on day 1, do that. And then that underwater blackout. And don't forget the 25 meter evacuation. So that's the way I run my courses. If you have any questions, reach out to me and let me know. I'm happy to help you.